to get to hear from Anne Mellinger and Brilliant Inc. I was lucky enough to be in a conference last month with a couple Brilliant Inc. people, and they were excellent. Now we're going to hear from their head honcho. Brilliant Inc., it's both an internal communications consulting firm and a creative agency dedicated to creating meaningful experiences for employees. So later, she is going to be joined by a moderator. We'll get him to come up a little bit later, but right now, let's invite Anne to the stage and talk from Brilliant Inc. Come on up, Anne.
Thanks. Hi. Good. Who doesn't want to walk on to Beyonce, right? That's perfect. That was a last-minute decision, so thank you so much. Thank you, first of all, to Staffbase. Thank you for everyone that chose this room to be in. I appreciate it. It's kind of, a lot of pressure. I'm following W. Camille Bell, and then I'm going to be preceding Tarana Burke. No big deal. First public speaking engagement since pre-COVID, no big deal. So I'm just being vulnerable and telling you all where I'm at. But again, I'm really excited to be here and talk to you and to be in a room full of people that do what we do. And for this presentation, we've talked a lot today about connecting with your audience in really meaningful ways. And this presentation is meant to be super tactical and give you some very specific tools that you can take back to your organizations and actually start to do that. So just very quickly, I want to give you a little bit of background about Brilliant Inc. Phoebe already introduced us. We're a communications agency. Everything that we do is seen through the lens of the employee. And everything that we do starts with research and data. Our research team member is actually here, Becky in the back. And that is exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to take some of those concepts and actually put them into practice. Brilliant Inc., we parachute in to work with different kinds of organizations to support them on everything from internal communications, research, strategy, planning. We even got the opportunity to partner with the lovely Kyla, who I'm not sure is here. Is she in here, Kyla? No, she's probably preparing for her Q&A with Tarana Burke. But we got to partner with Staffbase and developed the Gold Quill Award-winning salary report last year. And one of the things that made this salary report so successful in our mind is that we use personas to develop it. And the 2022 report, as you may have already heard, is open. It's going to be out soon. So go in and add your data, because the more data we have, the more rich of a story that we have to tell. This is a few of the kinds of organizations that we work with, and I share this to say that the strategies and techniques that we're talking about today are relevant whether you have 100 employees or 100,000 employees, or in the case of GE, I think 300,000 plus employees at last count, I don't know. And what we're going to talk about is developing personas. Just by show of hands, how many of you have ever developed personas, employee personas, in your work? Okay, a few. Good. I'm glad my team raised their hands. Good job. Because we do. And personas are essentially a fictional character that is meant to represent sort of a cluster of people in your audience that maybe have an overlap in some of their key characteristics or behaviors. So what does all this have to do with storytelling? Well, we've heard a lot of talk today about, W. Kamau Bell was just talking about the importance of authenticity, the importance of connecting. The two amazing women from the Skim talked about how they really work to get to know their audience so that they can increase readership, right? So that's where personas come in. Now, I'm going to explain with a story that takes place in Texas. I'm a Texan, I grew up there, and it would be impossible for me to get up here today and talk about Texas without acknowledging what happened yesterday. I'm sure all of us, our hearts are in Texas today. I did grow up in Texas, and I want to rewind back to the 1980s. Here's me, little Texan in the 1980s. Some of you weren't born yet. I know this one wasn't born yet. But at the time, there was a huge litter issue in the state of Texas. The sides of the roads were just covered in garbage, and the Texas Department of Transportation was spending millions of dollars each year to clean up the garbage. And so they decided to try to create a marketing campaign that would help reduce the garbage problem. So they hired this marketing agency and basically said, okay, here's our challenge. No big deal. We've got to convince Texans to stop littering, right? It's just 16 million or so drivers. We can do this. And so the marketing agency knew, as any good marketing agency does, that in order for your story to really resonate and to change behavior, which that's what this campaign was set out to do, was to actually change behavior. In order to do that, you really have to understand and get into the mind of your audience members. And one great way to do that is through the development of personas. So we're going to walk through exactly the process that they used to develop their persona. What they did to start is they pulled out some basic data to understand drivers in the state of Texas. They looked at basic demographics like age, gender, household income, things like that, to really start to understand who are we talking to here. They layered that in with research looking at litter culprits. Okay, and what they found at the time was that the largest portion of drivers in the state of Texas were men ages 18 to 34. And what they also found is that men ages 18 to 34 were the biggest litter culprits. Okay? They also found that more litter fell out of the back of pickup trucks. And guess what was the most popular automobile at the time in Texas, and probably still is? Pickup trucks. And they also took a look at some really interesting research that Gallup did looking at state pride. And what they found, and any of you who knows anyone from Texas will find this as no surprise, that 70% of Texans believe that there's no place better to live than Texas. Okay, so we can see that there is a picture starting to take shape here, right? So again, we're not trying to paint a picture of the entire 16 million driver population. We're trying to hone in on a segment to really help us understand how to motivate behavior change. So the segment's coming together. We're looking at litterers. They're men. They are pickup truck drivers. They were not college educated because most at that time were not. And so using this segment, using this representative data, they developed a persona. And here he is, folks, none other than Bubba. Okay, I didn't make him. This is the Texas Department of Transportation and the ad agency. They've got copyright on this fine gentleman. And he is a huge fan of the state of Texas, also loves his pickup truck. And we need to speak to him. How are we going to motivate Bubba, who, again, is just a representative sample of a much larger population? How are we going to motivate him to stop littering? So do we think that maybe give a hoot, don't pollute is going to resonate? Probably not. Probably not really going to work saying, please don't litter. It's not good for the environment. We really needed something a little more oomph. Does anybody know what campaign they came up with? Got it. Don't mess with Texas. It is so perfect for Bubba. It's so on the nose, right? It's aggressive. It makes you feel like you're like a band of outlaws protecting our state from litterers. And it kind of makes you feel like you're part of the solution, right? And part of what made this so successful is that it was developed with a specific someone in mind. It resonates with a much larger audience, but it was developed with a particular someone in mind. And it was such an effective campaign. It's one of the stickiest campaigns of all time. It was developed more than 30 years ago. It's still heavily in use today. You can see it all over swag. More importantly, it resulted in over 70% reduction of garbage on the side of the road within 5 years and saved millions of dollars. So what does this have to do with us? Okay, by show of hands, how many of you are responsible for all employee communications? many of you. And that's hard, especially for someone at a very large organization, but even at a small organization. When you're tasked with communicating with all employees, that can feel overwhelming. It can feel nameless, faceless, very hard to connect to. Whether you're writing a newsletter article or an email or an all-hands meeting, it can be very difficult when you're not able to actually hone in on who am I really talking to. And in fact, your communications can become really watered down. So if you take away only one thing from my presentation today, let it be this. And I'm going to pull Brene Brown. If you ever listen to Brene Brown, you know that she often repeats to make sure you're really listening, okay? So by not speaking to a particular someone with our communications, we risk not connecting with anyone. By not speaking to a particular someone with a someone in mind, a person, a real person in mind, we risk not connecting with them at all. We risk communications that are watered down, that are generic, and feel irrelevant. And we've all received them, right? We've all seen them. So that's where personas can come in. So let's now imagine, let's take our own organizations and talk about what this would look like. We'll follow the very same process that the marketing agency followed in Texas. So first you want to start by looking at your employee demographics. Go to your HRIS, start to pull out things like age, functions, tenure, basic facts that you can start to gather very easily. And then you want to layer that in with some more colorful details. And these are the kinds of things that you might get in a communications preferences survey or focus groups. We love focus groups. And really what you're trying to do here is start to pull out some things to understand your audiences a little better. One way that I like to think about this is if I was to say to you, what are the three biggest segments of your organization? You can just sort of start to think in thirds, right? It might be that you are looking at your 3 largest functions, right? Or maybe you are thinking about you've got a headquarters, non-headquarters, you've got field, maybe you have people that are online and not. Maybe your organization, half your organization was hired in the last 2 years. And so you really want to make sure you're thinking about new employees versus tenured employees. Okay, so again, the purpose here is that we're not trying to get every single employee into a bucket, but we're trying to get large representative segments of your population. So for this example, let's say we've chosen our 3 largest functions, and we're going to hone in on the product team at our organization. Okay, so we've pulled some basic data about this team. We know a little bit about them in terms of tenure, in terms of age group. We've also done some focus group work, and we're really starting to understand who makes up this product team. So from there, we can actually begin to create our own bubbas. Okay, so we've created a template, and you can download it. You can it should work from wherever you're sitting, let's hope, that you can scan the QR code or you can go to that link and download this, and it has all the instructions that we're talking through right now, step by step, to create your personas. So let's walk through it. The first thing that I want to say, and this is really important, is that you really need to give your personas a real face and a real name, right? We talked earlier, one of the very first speakers today talked about the importance of empathy in your communications, right? It's hard to have empathy for this person. They don't even have eyes. So let's give a real face, a real name. It doesn't have to be Bubba. In this case, we're going to go with Marcus. And Marcus is someone that I can picture. I could see myself walking down the hall and having a conversation. He's very busy, but he would look up and have a conversation with me. And that's the first step. Next, you want to start to think about some things that identify him, right? Go back to that HRIS data. Think about his age, how long he's been with the company. Start to think about some other personality traits and qualities that may impact how you communicate with Marcus. One way that we really like to do this, and that's why we've included it on our template, is we like to put in a quote. So use an illustrative quote that shows how Marcus thinks and acts. Of course, you want to consider his communications preferences. In Marcus's case, he only wants you to communicate with him on Slack if it's about his team and his project. Otherwise, don't bug me on Slack. And then one of the last things that we really like to do is sort of picture a day in the life, okay? You don't have to go quite as far as looking at his calendar, but try to imagine, does Marcus commute? Does he try to get home and be with his family and then get back online at night? Does he have a lot of meetings? How many meetings does he have a day? Does he need heads down time? Are we going to be disturbing that heads down time with the communication? So really you want to think about and understand how to communicate with Marcus. So now that we have this picture and we have this human person that we can actually imagine getting on a Zoom with, let's start to think about how we would communicate with him. And before you sit down and build a communication or even a communication plan, you want to start by asking some key questions. So for this first example, let's say that we're a company on Earth, so we care about the environment, as all of them should, and we want to get our employees to understand what we're doing to reduce our environmental impact. So let's take Marcus. And one of the things that we like to do with our personas actually is, once you've created this person, print it out, put it in a frame, or make a cardboard cutout and actually bring them to your meetings. There's nothing quite like the power of sitting with a picture of a person and asking, what does Marcus know? Why does he care about this topic? What action do we really want him to take? So in this case, we're a company, we have an environmental impact report, we want Marcus to read it, we want him to feel proud. Okay, so we could just send him the link to the site, we could Slack it to him, he probably won't look at it. And so instead what we did is we said, let's create an infographic. And not just any infographic, infographics are fine, I'm sure you can all do them, but let's hone in on the specific ways that our technology, our products, which we know Marcus cares about, how are those impacting the environment? And we also knew from our focus group data that he's probably competitive, and so let's make it a little fun. Let's actually hide some Easter eggs in here. Let's make a scavenger hunt within the infographic, and they can win company swag if they're able to identify different facts. So you can see how just by spending some time to get to know your audience, you can begin to develop communications that are going to be more relevant and meaningful to them. And it's not just going to be for Marcus or this product team, but because it was developed with a specific someone in mind, it's all that much more relevant to everyone. So here's another topic. Benefits, right? We could certainly just send out some basic open enrollment information. That would be fine. But again, let's sit down with Marcus. Let's ask ourselves, what does Marcus care about? What's important to him, given his age, given his tenure, given his way of absorbing information? And so instead of just sending him a basic open enrollment communication, let's send some little snackable, bite-sized tidbits that talk about saving for the future. Now, you may be asking, what do you do when you have different personas, right? We recommend, especially for companies that are just getting started, that you just have 3. No more than 3, because again, remember, you're not trying to put every single employee into a bucket. You're trying to understand some key segments to resonate with all of your employees. So, to illustrate this point, I'm actually going to take us back in time again, back to the 80s. And I have to give full credit for this next part to Duarte. If you've never heard of Duarte, huge fan. Nancy Duarte has written a number of books and has a whole company and workshops around effective storytelling. And this is from her book, Resonate. Highly recommend it. And in it, she talks about Ronald Reagan, right? The great communicator. However you feel about him and his politics, he's a great communicator, great orator. And does anybody know anything about what happened on January 28th, 1986, when he gave one of his most famous speeches? That's right. The Challenger space shuttle tragedy. And part of what made it such a great tragedy is that there was a teacher. It was the first time a civilian had gone up in space. And the teacher was meant to talk to students while in space. According to the New York Times, something like half of all school children were watching, including me, maybe some of you. And it was a great tragedy. Ronald Reagan was supposed to give State of the Union address that night and had to quickly shift gears. And one of the things why this speech is so effective is that he was able to connect with a number of different audiences and acknowledge the pain that they were all feeling in a very personal way while still talking to the entire world. Okay, and so he spoke to actually 5 different segments in his speech. The first was collective mourners, right? All Americans. Next were the families of the fallen, the 7 astronauts who died, including Krista McAuliffe, a teacher. School children, as I mentioned. And remember, this is the 80s. For anyone who grew up in the 80s, you know, like, space was a big deal. We all wanted to go to space camp. Everybody wanted to go be an astronaut. It was a big deal for school children. It was also, we were in the thick of a lot of political strife with the Soviet Union, and in particular, the space program. Russia's space program was really cloaked in secrecy. So that was another thing that was at play. And then finally, the employees of NASA, and helping them feel that they could have confidence and faith in the future of the space program. So in a minute, I'm going to play the speech for you. Okay, it's about 4 minutes long, and what I want you to do, I'm going to just divide the room. Okay, so this far section, if you're to the right, my left, of this aisle, you're going to be collective mourners. Okay, when you hear him speak to you, I want you to raise your hand. You are going to be the families of the fallen, this section right here between these 2 aisles. When you hear him addressing you, I want your hands to go up. Okay? Everyone here in the middle, between these 2 pillars, you're school children. So when you hear him speak to you, put your hand up. This section here, you will be Russia, the Soviet Union rather, still. And the last section here, to the left of this aisle, you'll be NASA employees. Okay, so we're going to listen to the video, we're going to watch it, and when you hear him speaking to you and addressing your pain, I want you to raise your hands. And we'll be able to really see how he skillfully moves from one audience to another in one single communication. Okay, let's go ahead and play the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union, but the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly.
Yep.
We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie,
Yep,
Judith Resnick,
he's talking to you,
Ronald
families
Reagan,
of the fallen.
Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe. We mourn their loss as a nation together. The families of the 7, we cannot bear, as you do, the full impact of this tragedy. But we feel the loss, and we're thinking about you so very much. Your loved ones were daring and brave, and they had that special grace, that special spirit that says, give me a challenge, and I'll meet it with joy. They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover its truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us. We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. But for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttles take off. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow. I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program. And what happened today does nothing to diminish it. We don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all
Soviet Union.
in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space. Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journeys continue. I want to add that I wish I could talk to every man and woman who works for NASA or who worked on this mission.
There he is again.
And tell them your dedication and professionalism have moved and impressed us for decades, and we know of your anguish. We share it. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and the historian later said he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today, we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was, like Drake's, complete. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us for the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. Thank you.
Not bad. And you can see how he was able to make every single one of those audiences feel like he was speaking to them. And that's what we want you to be able to do with personas. We want you to be able to think about, okay, I have two very different kinds of audiences as my organization. I've got someone like Marcus who is so busy, is so heads down, does not want to pick his head up unless it is super relevant to him. And then we have someone like Lauren who is in the field, she's moving fast, she's not at her desk, but she's relatively new and she wants to hear more. She wants it all, and let her decide what she's going to filter in and out. And so one way that you can do this, maybe with your newsletter, is use things like icons, color coding, so that somebody like Marcus can just see what he needs, it pops right out to him, whereas someone like Lauren can quickly skim through all of it. So I have issued this challenge every time I've given this talk. I would love and welcome any of you to go back and work on personas using our templates and share them with me. And I would be happy to share my feedback with you. So I hope one of you will take me up on the challenge, more than one of you ideally. And one of the very first things that you can do once you have developed your own Bubba's or Marcus or Lauren's is sit with them, again, maybe it's a cardboard cutout or a printout, and take your last 5 newsletters and say, okay, in these last 5 issues, are there topics or images or a communications approach that resonates with Marcus? And maybe you're doing a great job, and maybe you're doing an okay job with one of your other personas, and maybe another one of your personas you've missed completely in the last 5 issues. So again, the link to download the template and the step-by-step instructions on how to develop your personas is available online. And I just have to say, I love personas because they really help us stay connected to our why, right? We're all here doing this because we believe that people deserve to have good experiences at work. We are doing this for the individual employee, and there's no better way to stay connected to those individual employees than by developing personas and communicating with them with empathy. So that is all I've got, and got a few minutes for questions. Thank you.
And thank you so much for your presentation.
Of course.
Actually,
thank you, Ralph.
now nothing could go wrong with creating personas, I guess.
That's the hope.
So it's actually also very important. I'm Ralph. I'm the head of content with Staffbase, so I'm actually dealing with that, what you showed. So is there actually anything that could go wrong? Like, what are the missteps we could do when creating personas?
Sure. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. Probably one of the biggest things that we see that goes wrong is that people develop personas based on assumption. I can sit here and picture my bubbas and just write them up. It's so important, and if you don't believe me, go find Becky in the back, and she'll tell you all about it. It has to be based on real data. Has to. So that's one thing that goes wrong. And another thing that goes wrong is that people try to develop too many. So I saw a presentation from someone at GE a few years ago, and I was told, I don't know, GE folks hold me honest, GE uses 3 employee personas. And so I say that sometimes, if you have a company with 300,000 plus employees that can get it down to 3, any company can get it down to 3. So that's another misstep, because if you try to create a persona for every single segment of your population, you've now missed the whole point of personas in the first place.
Thank you. So it's all about the data. So how about bias? So how likely is it that we are biased when creating personas?
Sure. No, we're all biased. It's impossible not to be. If we're human, we're biased. But you want to take whatever steps you can to minimize bias. Obviously, one way to do that, again, is to use real data. And another thing that we say a lot when developing personas is make your personas diverse. Because if you're communicating with a diverse audience, that's good communication, right? If you are taking that approach from the start, that's going to be better communication.
Amazing, thank you. So I would like now to give you the chance to ask Anne some questions. Do you have? I can see there. Wait, I'm coming to. Perfect.
There are a lot of mic runners. We got to make them feel useful.
So you just mentioned diversity.
Yes.
And we all think about diversity in certain ways. But what do you consider diversity when you're creating these personas beyond just the surface level of box, box, box?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, one of the things that we say, again, it should be based on data. And maybe you're looking at your organization today and it's 70% white. But your goal is to be more diverse. You want to develop your personas based on that goal. If you are striving to be, and go talk to your talent acquisition team. If your talent acquisition team is striving to hire more women, or to hire more veterans, or to hire more people of color, then that is what your personas should reflect. And again, if you're thinking about those diverse audiences, then you're more likely to have more robust and compelling communications. Does that answer it? Great.
There's another question in the back. Over there.
This is a little outside the scope of what you talked about, but I'm curious about your opinion on something. I know
great.
a Canadian company a couple of years ago created a persona and then used that persona internally as the spokesperson to promote their information. Would the Texas campaign, for instance, have been more powerful if it was Bubba says, don't mess with Texas, compared to the Texas Transportation Authority says, don't mess with Texas? What is your opinion on using those personas then as the spokesperson for that information?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think again, part of the reason why the Texas one works so well, and it works well on me, who I am certainly not Bubba, is that it was developed with somebody in mind, but it still is relevant enough that it can resonate with a large audience. So my concern with tying it to a single person is that it might lose that. But you know, I think it depends. It's an interesting idea. I like it.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So I work for a recruitment company, and I would love to know how using personas can help me in my role as a recruiter.
That's a great question. And it's definitely something that we do. You know, a lot of times we'll work with organizations to develop recruiting personas based on what are you trying to do with the makeup of your organization? What are your recruiting goals? Or maybe what are those roles that are the hardest to recruit for? And really start to think about then take that persona and go through your candidate experience. What is their first interaction with your organization like? What do they then go through? Think about that just like we thought about the calendar of Marcus's day, think about every step that they have to go through as a candidate. Do they have to fill out an application online and then wait? And how long do they have to wait for this response? Where are they learning about you? So it's very much a similar process in using data to develop some core segments that you want to target and making sure that your candidate experience is really focused on appealing to that audience.
I have a tactical question.
Let's do it.
Like, oh no, you
bring it on.
Can of worms, because we're going to be coming over to your worksheet. So, we're developing a new program. Part of that is launching an intranet, right? So, in order of priority of process, right now we're just trying to lay down the tracks and get this thing up and launched. As a newer function in our strategy, how important should we be ranking this persona work? And also, does the new demographic of hybrid work, remote work, this new world of work that we're in, matter in the persona work as well?
Absolutely, it matters. It definitely matters. Now, in order of priority, that's a harder one to answer. I mean, look, a lot of it with developing an intranet is like the basics. How does it hook into our other systems and processes? How often are we going to refresh it? I would say where a persona becomes super important related to an intranet is when you get into your content strategy. How often are you updating? What are you doing? What kinds of content? Is it resonating with the different personas? So process-wise, it may not be at the very beginning, but certainly as you're building out your content strategy and how you're going to use that intranet to reach them, that is super important. In terms of hybrid and not, I mean, yeah, apps, I mean, what matters more? You know, thinking about, and that's where like that calendar can come into play, right? Really sitting down and thinking about, okay, I don't know what they're doing every minute of every day because they're not here, but I can certainly start to imagine, can also do focus groups to really understand what does your day-to-day look like? How often are you getting interrupted by an email in your inbox? How many meetings are you going to a day? Do you really have time to go to the intranet? Or maybe first thing in the morning when you log on, it's the first thing that you see. So really getting in and understanding their behaviors is super important. And I think focus groups is a great way to get that.
Hi, I'm Mike from Walgreens. I was thinking about the speech that we watched and how it was a captive audience of the whole country watching that day. And so I was thinking, in today's world, we're getting news in multiple different channels. Can you think of a kind of recent example of a company or a person that's doing a good job of reaching different personas through different channels?
That's interesting. Well, I mean, first of all, I was super impressed with a lot of the things that Walgreens was sharing, a lot of the examples from the panel earlier today. I think a lot of that is clearly based on listening to your people, and that's one of the most powerful things. I mean, I've said the word research so many times, and I think that's really what it comes down to is listening to your people, finding out what's resonating with them, and really then honing in on those areas. Thinking of one company, I mean, we often point to Patagonia as an organization that does a really great job of understanding its employees and speaking to them in different ways, not just the fact that they're outdoorsy, but they are also that they care about issues around social justice. So they're often communicating on those topics that are important to them. I think any organization that's choosing to step forward and talk about some of the social justice issues is probably on the right path because they're probably listening to their people. There's a number of organizations, and I know Walgreens is one of them. Our people are telling us, we care, this is important to us, this is distracting to us or upsetting to us, and so therefore you need to make sure that you're going out and speaking to those issues. Anyone else?
Any more questions?
Great. Let's go, Ralph.
You mentioned the salary report and the
Yes.
awards you got, so congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Can you maybe tell us a bit more about the salary report and also the importance of content for that report?
Sure, definitely. So the staff-based salary report is all about understanding salaries of all of us, internal communicators, right? And so when the data came back from that survey, and again, the 2022 survey's in the field now, the team sat down and really thought about who's the audience for this report, right? It's us. But really, let's think about, is the audience more in-house or are they agency like me? Are they early career, mid-career? What kind of information are they going to mostly be interested in and looking for? And they use those personas to really develop both the report and how it's all presented, as well as the supporting communications to that.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
So just have a look into the audience. Is there another question? If not, then I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you so
again.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.